Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Tuesday, July 29th, and we have got a busy show planned for you today. We have got Joe Marchese on the stream today. He's going to talk to us about AI and advertising. AWS is joining us to talk about the role of the Chief AI Officer. We have also got news about a new investment out of Snowflake Ventures. And finally, we are going to have our Microsoft reporter on to talk about how AI is lowering switching costs for software providers. That is a very interesting discussion I am looking forward to. I want to start with two great stories out of the Information over the past 24 hours. Our Asia Bureau published a piece this morning about how AI coding tool Cursor is becoming very popular in China. And one of the most interesting parts about this story is that engineers in China are trying to access another popular coding tool, Anthropic's Claude Code. But the restrictions that Anthropic is putting on China customers accessing that program is making them turn to Cursor. And that's what's leading to an increasing popularity for that platform. It is a very interesting story. Another big story that we published was a scoop that Fireworks AI is in talks to raise money at a $4 billion valuation. It is yet another cloud company that is renting out NVIDIA chips. Lightspeed and Index Ventures are the names that are being floated as the leads. And we also got our hands on the company's revenue projections, so be sure to check out that story. Now, one more big headline before we get started. Spotify reported quarterly earnings today. Revenue was up, but shares were down. The most interesting part of these earnings is the fact that Spotify's ads business shrunk slightly this quarter. And Daniel Ek, the CEO, said on the call that he wasn't happy with the team's execution. It's kind of hard not to connect that with the fact that Spotify's ads chief left the company yesterday. We learned they haven't found a replacement yet. And so Spotify's ads team clearly has their work cut out for them. So we will see how that story shakes out. Okay, on to our first guest. We just talked about Spotify's ads business. Advertising in general hasn't gotten enough attention as big tech earnings get underway. And so we're going to double click on that with our next guest. I want to bring on our editor-in-chief, Jessica Lessin, who has a very special conversation planned with digital and traditional ad veteran Joe Marchese. They're going to talk about all the little noticed ways AI is disrupting the ad business. I am so excited for that conversation. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Akash. And Joe, thank you for joining us. You know, your day job now is as the general and build partner at Human Ventures, but you know the advertising business. You've been head of advertising for the Fox Networks group. So thanks so much for joining us at kind of this wild time. You know, I wanted to have this conversation because we're in the middle of earnings. We saw Google last week. We have Meta tomorrow. It seems like we know how disruptive AI could be. Everyone is talking about it. But these ad businesses are holding up. So I want to talk to you about where you think we are, but maybe looking into your crystal ball a little bit, what we should be thinking about when we think about AI disrupting advertising in the coming months and years.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I think the first thing to level set is disconnecting AI disrupting advertising from Google, right? AI will disrupt search in some ways, but not search querying. Like more people are querying Google than ever. The question is traffic going out to the web as we know it? And so the web was built on traffic being sent to publishers and websites or travel sites or restaurant sites or recipe sites. And all of those, or most of them, were built on an advertising backbone. So it's hard to overstate. And people think of advertising as a small category. I'm almost surprised it's not covered as much. The largest companies in the world, like you mentioned, Meta, Google, Amazon, massive ad business. Uber's now in the ad business. Like it is Walmart and its retail media network, like drive its stock price. It's straight to the bottom line. And so what AI disrupts is the flow of search. And after Google, YouTube is the next largest search engine. And after that, you have Amazon and Walmart and the retail media networks. And if agents are acting on the behalf of humans rather than searching through and having a chance to advertise to people, you end up with a disruption of multiple billions of dollars.
Yeah. So obviously it's early. We're not seeing it yet, or are we? I mean, what do you see when you look at the results Google put out or what you're starting to see in the products?
I think you are seeing the impact already in terms of traffic from Google to publishers.
Yeah.
And the irony there is that publishers, right, are the things that large language models need to train on. And that is why you have, if you haven't seen, Matthew Prince gave a talk out at Cannes Lion. So why is a Cloudflare CEO at Cannes Lion without an advertising business? And it's because the amount of times that LLMs are crawling publisher websites without paying for advertising or paying for subscription has gotten to it used to be 6 to 1 for Google. Now it's 60,000 to 1 for some of the LLMs.
But are
And so,
those the queries? So, as a publisher, and I can assure you, my publisher group chats have been irate and paranoid about this issue for probably multiple years. But when you look at Google's business and how it makes money and from the types of queries, I believe Google said in some testimony in recent months, they've seen AI affect like homework queries, but not commerce queries, which it would be the golden goose. What do you think? How does that change in behavior you're talking about affect
yeah,
the golden goose?
I think I mean, travel queries,
Yeah.
restaurant queries, like what's the best pair of headphones to wear queries. I mean, yes, the things, but they could still, I mean, I would bet that, again, separating Google from search because they have the YouTube business, they have a cloud server business. So I think Google will continue to perform in while this other business model is disrupted that everybody else is built on top of. I think the difference now is it's a potential for a reset. Like, what will these large language models feed on if there is no business model for all of those places that we're talking about?
Mm, yeah. What about flipping it? And what if you are an open AI and you're getting more of these travel queries, headphone queries? You've hired a former Meta executive, Fiji, Simo. What do you do to capitalize on that massive advertising business?
So here is the trick, and this is the part that I'd love for everyone to think about. At what level would we allow advertising to affect AI?
Mhm.
So if an advertiser bought influence on the back end of AI, so I ask for travel response, the reason why they call it an agent is it's supposed to be working on your behalf. But if for some reason, Marriott or Hilton or Pickett, right, or a country travel department or tourism department said, "Hey, I'll pay to have my answer injected into an AI answer," like, we don't know what that would even look like yet. And actually, and I want to be clear, I don't even. It might be happening not on the big models; they have too much to lose to not be
Mhm.
giving you the best result they can. But any other smaller model with a wrapper over the top could be influencing a result towards people who are paying them to tune the model. Like, it could be very simple. Imagine tuning a model and just saying, remember, every time you're asked a question about eating out, when you were a child, you loved McDonald's. And just lightly put in there. And so that idea of what level will allow advertising to influence AI models is a huge question.
Mhm. Do you think the models so you think it's possible that's happening? If you want to maintain trust, say you're one of the frontier models, is there a role for advertising or is that TBD?
I think there is a role for advertising in providing the content. So I think advertising has to happen at either the publisher or brand level,
Mhm,
because like, it is who is providing the result that can allow for advertising contextual matching. That's what AdSense did so well. And remember, half of Google's ad business, I don't even know if it's half anymore, but a large amount of it is on publisher websites, right? That's the
mhm.
AdSense size of the business,
Yeah,
where AdWords is on the search engines. If there isn't traffic flowing to those sites, that starts to come down.
yeah. Yeah, I think that well, it hasn't been a big business for many publishers for some time, but that is an important question. Um, I know shifting gears slightly within advertising. So Meta and others that aren't in the search business, how do they play the AI ad game? Is this a positive? I mean, it's also so disruptive. How do we begin to think about that impact?
Well, you have to look at Meta. I mean, they're playing it the way that you'd think they would, which is being open model. Let's go, like pushing the envelope. Same way ChatGPT. But the thing that's interesting is Meta and Google are both funding their capex by their amazing advertising businesses,
Absolutely.
right? So their advertising is the piggy bank that is funding it. The difference is Google's model is predicated on some of that, whereas Meta's model is predicated on engagement, right? And so if AI increases engagement, there is a lot of potential upside for them in using it. Like, the thing I always find fascinating is AI has existed for a very long time. The Google search algorithm, the TikTok algorithm, the recommended videos, like it was just machine learning and AI in the hands of platforms, keeping you engaged or giving you utility. Now you have basically given AI to consumers, and we haven't figured out yet where does advertising fit into that. And some people would just say, "Who cares?" And again, I might even be one of them and say, advertising broke the internet in a lot of ways with listicles and doing things to try to get people to click on page views and like chasing advertising dollars or the metrics that funded advertising dollars was one of the reasons we ended up here. I could make the same argument that advertising broke cable. Like the entire cable bundle would have been fine with the better user experience over time because we're getting back to it. Different conversation. But
But
if you
free is
just
powerful, man. Free is powerful, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's just really hard to imagine the AI ecosystem without advertising.
right. And well, or even simpler, just look at if we remove tens of billions of dollars from the ecosystem, as little as it might be that's still flowing to publishers and content creators, if we remove it, then that is just less money to be shared amongst people who write content, who create the stuff that then feeds the model. So that's the question I have is like, this isn't a next year, 2 years thing. This is a next 6 months if at the rate adoption is going.
Yeah. Well, my last question for you, you're a startup guy now. You see probably the most interesting startups across media and tech. Are there opportunities for founders to catch this wave, to be early adopters and thinking about what the ad model looks like? Or much like the model development, is this really for the big guns with little room for the small guys?
No, I absolutely think there is. I mean, if you think back to search, Overture, like click pay-per-click marketing wasn't just invented by Google in up north. It was actually out of LA where someone said, "Hey, we have an idea here." I think that looking at AI and saying, okay, if consumers are going to interact with an agent that's on their behalf, what role would advertising play? The things I think to think about, I'm seeing companies that are structuring MCPs, which is basically designing websites for computers to read instead of humans to read.
Mm-hmm.
And you could build into that, okay, well, you'll read the advertising as well. You know, there are PR firms, SEO seems to be one of the most important things. The problem is no one knows how to value it. Like getting mentioned in an article means you're more likely to come up in a result in ChatGPT, which is ironically running on top of the Bing crawler, which very few people have paid attention to. And so we've had those discussions, and I see interesting models all the time. So if that layer becomes not commoditized, but ubiquitous, that AI can be plugged into everything, then the question of what an ad experience looks like is actually fair game.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. We need to now turn our attention to what layer. Is it at the agent layer? Is it at the site layer? And I think there's this Wild West phase will certainly yield a lot of opportunity and eventually disruption. So thank you, Joe. You've given us a lot to think about.
Good to be here.
And back to you, Akash.
All right. Well, our next segment is with our presenting sponsor, Amazon Web Services. So far on the show, we have talked a lot to founders and investors who are building AI for businesses. But the thing that doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that businesses can't just buy and switch to AI overnight. In fact, for a lot of these businesses, I'm talking about automakers and retailers and financial institutions, they don't even know where to start with AI. And so I want to bring on someone who helps people with that issue every day. Shaun Nandy is a director at AWS. He is the former CIO of Dow Jones News Corp, and I am really excited to have him on. Shaun, welcome to TITV. Thanks for being here.
Gosh, thanks for having me today. Super excited.
So, look, I want to get into the meat of the matter here, but very quickly, tell us what your role is at AWS so we can set the stage.
Absolutely. So I've been here almost 6 years, and I look after what we call our field tech teams. These are all of our solution architects and customer solutions and success folks who help our customers build with AWS. So we go out there, we explain our services, we understand their business challenges, and we think about how they can use both cloud and AI to get to real outcomes.
So the thing that I want to talk to you most about today is talent, because the biggest story in AI right now today are the massive sums that are being spent on hiring talent at tech companies and fast-growing startups. But the other half of the story is that established companies, companies that have been around for decades, they're trying to build out their AI strategies right now. And in my mind, it's a very significant transformation. So I mean, let's just start with a basic question. I mean, how is that shift going for you right now and the people you're talking to?
It's a constant conversation, and I have that conversation at every level. I'll have it with boards, I'll have it with CEOs, I'll have it with CIOs and CFOs, even line of business leaders. And the conversations are super nuanced. It's both on what skills do I need in my knowledge worker population to leverage all these tools and think differently with AI? But the first one, who's going to lead this charge for me? Who's going to really lead and drive AI adoption and think about the guardrails and what partners I use, and how do I staff that role? So we're increasingly seeing a role of chief AI officer, sometimes it's chief data and AI officer, get sort of built out in these companies. In fact, I'll give you a stat. We just published a generative AI adopters index a few months ago, and we interviewed, I think it was almost 4,000 decision makers at different companies, not AWS customers. This was super broad, everyone, every type of customer. And what we found is as of today, 60% of enterprises have named some type of chief AI officer. What's even more astounding, another 26% are applying to do so in 2026. So 86% of companies are going to have this sort of nebulous, ambiguous chief AI officer or chief data and AI officer.
So what is this chief AI officer then? What does that person end up being?
That's almost the first conversation I get to have at these board level conversations, like who should we hire? Or maybe I get to talk to one who's newly appointed who's like, what should I focus on? And I'll give you a little bit of a track here. First of all, every enterprise is at a different stage of adoption with cloud and with AI. And those who have been very forward looking with technology the last decade or so are often in a better position, right? They've been maybe experimenting with AI, they've bought some early tool sets, they've done some implementations. Others, they've maybe avoided the journey to cloud. They've been nervous about it, they've been waiting for the right inflection point, and they're worried about being behind. So the folks in this role are quite variable. Some of them might have been a data scientist or an ML engineering leader who was already in the company. Sometimes it's a former CIO. I've even seen line of business leaders asked to take on this mantle. And so, depending on the persona, they come in with different expectations and perspectives. Sorry, a little technical glitch. They come in with different expectations and perspectives. And when I talk about the different expectations and perspectives, sometimes they'll come in and say, we want to govern security and compliance. Maybe it's a former CISO. We want to make sure that we're safe. And even that safety perspective, it's not just about data leakage, it's about legal exposures. On the other side, sometimes like we're in with procurement. What vendor are we buying? What vendor are we going to buy software from? How are we going to govern it? Those are places to start, but not where I would start.
So where would you start?
Yeah. I think the real thing you want to make AI adoption matter in enterprise is to democratize it, to get the line of businesses in and thinking about not just how they can save money, but how they can innovate faster. That means you have to have representation from those groups. And when I think about representation, that means it's not just about having a single chief AI officer, it's that team they can harness. So we encourage them to really build a center of excellence and to have that center of excellence, which doesn't have to be a bunch of people, by the way. It can be a bit virtual. Have that center of excellence offset the skills they're great at. So if you have a CISO running, becoming this chief AI officer, go get an engineering or product leader to join that extended team. If you have someone who's a former CIO, get some security folks in and think about how you want to show what success looks like.
And just to simplify things here, but when you say center of excellence, you're basically talking about a team of executives rather than just one person. Is that the idea?
It is. And by the way, executives are important in this, but like AI is super powerful. You really want some doers who can actually use the technology and start to harness the power of it, but also bring people on the journey. Because of course, the knowledge workers are reacting to this and saying, what's this mean for me? What's this mean for my job? And so I think this chief AI officer also successful if they're a change agent for the company. When I've had these CXO discussions, I was just in Detroit with one of the CEOs of one of the big three automakers. And I was with their staff, and they were asking about how AI might change their business. It was a super exciting conversation. And our conversation all came back to people. When we get people efficiency gains and innovation gains and changes, how does that value come back to the enterprise? What keeps people from just going home an hour early? What does it make it actually bring impact to the business? And how do you get them in? And we were looking at their chief AI officer, who happened to be a highly technical chief AI officer, who could really talk about what model was the best model and helping think about how product engineering could be improved. But they weren't thinking about the change management and people aspect. So we're like, you need a really strong line of business leader on this team who can really think about if their people are going to work differently.
So, I think it's kind of interesting that, the point I'm taking from you is that it doesn't necessarily need to be the one person. You need to have the team underneath. They need to have, oversight of different parts of the business. I mean, I guess, the thing that I'm wondering from you is, does everybody need a chief AI officer then? I mean, you talked about that stat that everyone's naming this person. It strikes me that maybe you actually don't need to name it. It's more of sort of an organizational shift.
Look, let's think about where we want to get to versus where we are today, right? Like 5, 6 years ago, you'd see companies start naming chief cloud officers and thinking about cloud being such an important part of the transformation. And now cloud is core part of a CIO or CTO or CFO's job. It is not a separate thing. I think having a chief AI officer is an acknowledgement that this is a major area of change. Someone has to lead the charge. But do I think it's a title with permanence? They're not going to be AI companies in a few years, right? Every company is just going to have AI embedded in it. And that's a fundamental change. So whether you name a dedicated role or you simply acknowledge it's impacting all the existing roles, it's that journey there. I do think for enterprises, having a chief AI officer can be a great way to sort of crystallize to everyone, we're jumping on this, we're embracing it. The skill set, it's not a given. And by the way, you need technical chops to work in this space, but you don't have to be a data scientist or an ML engineer to set company strategy and to evaluate partners and to think about what has the biggest business outcomes. So having a relative amount of business acumen, and then I'll give you the most important characteristic in these types of roles. And at Amazon, this is a core leadership principle for us. We have these leadership principles in Amazon that help us think about how to operate as employees and builders in our own organization. One of them is called learn and be curious. And if you're looking for a chief AI officer, you need someone who wants to work with and use the technology in their everyday lives and at work day in and day out. They have to be passionate about learning because things are changing so quickly.
I want to just jump in on that point. Things are changing quickly. This role that you're talking about, how has the role changed in the past year? And really, what do you think this role will be 3 years from now?
Yeah. Look, I think in the last year, the change I've seen, again, enterprises, mid-market companies, they're all at different paces in their rate of adoption and where they started from. But I'd probably say the role started with people looking for someone with those deep skills. They're like, let's go to one of the big AI companies like us and like our peers and hire someone who has these magical skills who can explain it to us. And I think companies are realizing it's more about knowing your business and being able to learn about it. That's part A. Part B was probably companies are like, how do we build our own models? Do we need to? And now they're realizing, no, in most cases, we need to pick the right partner that can take us on the journey. So how do we govern and manage those partners and where do we apply that tech? And last, getting the whole company leadership team on board with the journey. So thinking about like, where do we want to apply it first? Which lines of business will have the most impact? Is it really an IT spend issue? Probably not. This is really about business change and business spend. So getting live business leaders in.
So what about 3 years from now? Where do you think the role is going?
Yeah, I think the role in 3 years will probably be more of a visionary and governance role. By the way, visionariness and governance we think about as pretty far apart. But I think in 3 years, AI will be so embedded across lines of business. It'll be so embedded across vendor and partner tool sets. It'll be in everything that this role will really help security and compliance think about how do we move fast to adopt. It will help knowledge workers and leaders be inspired by what's possible with the technology and continue to change. I think that piece will persist. I think the actual guts of running it, that'll be super democratized across the business. You will not have separate teams just for AI anymore.
And you talked about that example of the automaker that you were visiting in Detroit. Can you think of any other sort of customers that you've worked with or really interesting case studies where the role of the chief AI officer has really taken on sort of an alternative shape and it's worked really well in ways you may not have expected?
Yeah, look, I spend a lot of time with every type of customer, and it's very different in our deep tech ISV partners versus, say, financial services or healthcare, travel. But I'll give you a couple. I think in financial services, working with banks, we've seen much faster adoption of AI than we expected. So, a pundit on the side might say, of course, financial services companies have large budgets and they have large tech teams, but they have often been slower to adopt new technology because of regulation and compliance. And FinServ companies, they knew their data. They're able to decide really quickly where they wanted to apply their data in. And so we've seen chief AI officers in those companies really look at those success stories and replicate them across other lines of business and help broaden that thinking. I think in travel and hospitality, we're seeing a lot of pressure. Post the pandemic, you had a lot of turnover in these industries. A lot of frontline talent was lost. And so there's a lot of hunger to think about how do we use AI to help customer experience really get better, combined with, of course, all the pressure from the macroeconomic environment on saving money. And so chief AI officers, I think, are really navigating, helping companies decide, am I trying to save money?
Right.
Or am I trying to have a better customer experience, build new products, harness gains and potentially, both in the bottom line, but also top line revenue? And we're seeing that happen in industries that are being disrupted by all this economic change around us right now.
Right. Well, look, it's a fascinating discussion, and it's a role that, as you say, I'm sure is changing often. Next time you come on, we're going to have you on with one of these chief AI officers, and then we can all talk about what the role is looking like, because, like you said, it's probably one of the fastest changing roles at the company. Shaun, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Once again, that is Shaun Nandy, a director at AWS, a presenting partner for this production. Now, we had news this morning that Snowflake has made another investment in another AI company. High Touch is an AI agents for marketing company that raised $80 million earlier this year at a $1.2 billion valuation. The company announced today that Snowflake is joining that round. And I want to bring on the founder of High Touch, Kashish Gupta, and Harshay Kapre, who leads Snowflake Ventures, to talk about this new investment. And I also want to hear about how this exemplifies the business development strategy at Snowflake that they're pursuing. Kashish and Harsha, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to TITV. It's great to have you.
Hey, Akash, good to be here as well. Hey, Akash, great to be here. Thank you.
So, Kashish, I want to start with you. I mean, just give us the 30 seconds. What exactly does High Touch do?
We help marketers use their data to make their marketing more personalized for their customers. That involves both AI agents as well as really typical data processes. And so we typically serve large consumer brands like PetSmart and Chime Bank, and we help them use their marketing in their data in a self-serve way on top of Snowflake.
So tactically, this looks like what? I mean, the marketing team has this data. They go with High Touch. You help them with an AI agent. The AI agent said, you give them a budget and they just do the marketing for 3 weeks. Well, what does it actually look like tactically?
Very soon, that's exactly how it'll look like. So layers. There's a UI layer where a marketer can choose exactly what they want to do with their data, run their campaigns. And we're building agents now to orchestrate that layer and be able to choose for our marketers, hey, we actually think this subset of customers is really interested in this product. Let's help you go sell that product. We'll build a campaign for you and launch that campaign for you.
And talk to me about the major milestones that you've hit this year. You raised this money earlier this year. I mean, talk to me about the last 6 months.
Last 6 months, we've really just been focused on engineering and product. So we built this product called AI Decisioning that can do one-to-one marketing for your customers. We choose from all of the content that you have in your entire repository what the best campaign is for every individual customer and the best journey. So we can choose for them what should they get on Monday, then on Friday, what push notification should they get, to eventually give them the best possible and most personalized customer experience. We've been working predominantly on that. We've been growing revenue double year over year, and I think investors are quite excited about that. And at the moment, we feel that we are just the best positioned in the modern data ecosystem to help marketers use their data.
When you say revenue doubled year over year, what are you at right now?
I can't share the exact numbers, but we're looking to get to 100 million early next year.
Great. Harsha, you guys invested in High Touch this morning. You've invested in a ton of AI companies. In fact, I want to get to the hot streak that Snowflake has been on in terms of investing in these companies. You've been a busy man. How did this deal come together?
So I've actually known Kashish for quite a while. I joined the Snowflake Ventures team almost 3 years ago, and he and I were talking even back then. So I've maintained kind of a pulse on the CDP space, is what we called it back then. I'll let Kashish tell us what it's called now. I think in the broader marketing area. But I have a background in product at Snowflake, so 8 years at Snowflake, 5 of that in product, and so I'm always looking at companies from that product lens. which is what can we unlock, through Snowflake Ventures, but what can we unlock really at the architecture or product level for a better experience for our customers? And to do that, there's obviously hints out there, where we want to start making some investments. But the biggest hint is, where do we have existing traction? And so the customer adoption of high touch and Snowflake was already there, right? And so this was more of a question of, hey, how do we find companies where we can kind of that notion of pouring fuel on the fire really explode an existing relationship? And so this one fit the bill really well. And I think now was the right time as they were continuing to grow. We mentioned, the revenue where they are, but also just in terms of customers. I mean, hundreds of customers already doing this just through our standard partnership motions. So we put a ventures investment behind this, and the idea is to really see how we can explode that or grow that significantly and rapidly.
And talk about Snowflake Ventures' broader strategy with respect to venture investments, because I want to zoom out a bit and talk about the other investments you've made. But I mean, how do you guys sort of see your portfolio broadly?
It really is about what I was just saying in regard to high touch, right? It's about identifying these and unlocking these better together stories. At the end of the day, we're trying to provide better experiences for our customers. Now, the selfish piece here is, it leads to more usage of Snowflake, right? But the idea is, how can we bring better partnerships, expand the ecosystem faster than what we do through standard channels? And so, you'll see our investments are a little bit, in various categories, right? We don't just say, hey, this is the category we're focused on. We look for areas where the partnership opportunity is there, where we think we can drive more usage, more consumption. We look for that architectural fit. Say, hey, this is a partner that's already leaning in. This is how the solutions work together. They're like this today. What if we brought them like this? What if we made that experience almost like a single platform? Do we think this will drive significant opportunity, both in terms of new markets, new customers, more usage? And then on our side, we also have a very strong go-to-market engine. And that's what we bring to the table, right? So we bring to the high touches and other customers where they're like, hey, we have something that can help extend the value of the data a lot of these companies already have in Snowflake. A lot of companies have centralized their data in Snowflake over the years. And we want to bring more and more tools that say, hey, if you already have this data in Snowflake, we can just connect in and bring you more value. So that's the general theme. It's the better together unlock. It's the, I always overuse the analogy, pouring fuel on the fire. But it's really, you'll see most of our investments start with, there's already an existing motion and relationship.
Harsha, talk to me about some of the technical challenges. This one was for Kashish. My apologies, Kashish. To talk to me about some of the technical challenges that you guys are that are really top of mind for you right now as it relates to AI agents in marketing.
Agents turned out to be a lot harder to deploy than any of us expected. I'm starting to realize why so many engineers say, oh, the agent is hallucinating, oh, it's fabricating data, and so on and so on. And so we have a lot of cardinality, right? So our customers have very different data and data schemas. Our agent has to be good at understanding that schema, understanding how that business makes money.
And when you say data and data schema, I mean, simplify it for us. What kind of data are we talking about here?
Yeah, so examples could include, for example, some customers have the concept of householding. And so do I want to sell groceries to you or to your family? And how do I know that this is the same person and that I should actually market one part of your family these grocery items and the other part the other grocery items? Just data gets really complex in the large enterprise. People have to know which data to access from which tables. And that's where the agent gets sometimes really confused, because the agent has to write these SQL queries to get to the bottom and the ground truth of what actually, who's buying what ultimately, these fact tables. So there's cardinality on the left side, on the data side. Then there's cardinality on the right side, because you have so many different marketing tools where you're running your campaigns. That is actually where we excel, because we integrate so deeply with those marketing tools. We can pull in together all of the data you have in your customer, all of the marketing campaigns you have in your marketing tools, and then actually give the agent all of that context without blowing up the context window, and let it make decisions on which customers should be getting which campaigns and how to do potentially new opportunities.
Right.
So the most exciting opportunity right now is helping our customers find little buried opportunities that they didn't know they had.
Right.
So did you know that this customer is really likely to buy this? If you send them this campaign, this order, you're likely to increase their LTV from $20 a month to $30 a month.
You guys sell to a number of different industries. What industry have you been surprised by, in terms of them really wanting your product?
I think quick serve restaurants are blowing up quickly.
Okay.
And we're modernizing. We see retail and media, that's kind of tried and true. And then travel hospitality. But I would say the restaurants are the ones that I'm the most
And
surprised by.
what is it about restaurants that makes your platform so effective?
It's a recurring purchase, and we can do a really good job of selling you exactly the items that you want. So can we get you hooked on breakfast and then maybe your morning coffee, and that turns into like the Friday night meal or the Super Bowl meal?
Interesting. Harshi, I want to come back to you. I mentioned some of the other investments Snowflake has been making. You guys also invested in Reka AI, which is another company that we had on the show last week. How many investments have you guys made this year in 2025?
I would say it's a lot. I'm trying to think of an exact number. I want to say, I mean, these are all everything's public, so I would say somewhere in the 15 to 20 range. It'd be my best guess at the moment.
Right. I mean, all I was trying to get at was, has the pace of it increased, over the time that you've been at the company?
Absolutely. I think my first year in the role, we did maybe 6 or 7. So, we're on pace to do quite a bit more this year. I think we're looking at some earlier stage motions now. Our typical thesis, as I mentioned, has been around, existing traction, which typically means you're a Series A or later.
Right.
It's not exact science, but typically that's where you are, where you've already got a motion with, a good customer base, good traction with Snowflake already. I think we've got a new accelerator program. The startup team now rolls under Corp Dev and Ventures. And so when we look at kind of the full startup journey, there's a lot more opportunity to look at some earlier stage investing to really drive kind of that Snowflake message, that ability to really help founders too. And that's the message we want to get out is, we are here to help founders who are building their products starting early. And that's kind of where, you're starting to see more volume.
And you talked about the heightened pace of venture investing. We've obviously seen big tech companies snapping up talent and also making acquisitions. Has the pace increased because Snowflake is looking to make more acquisitions in AI?
No, not necessarily. I think we keep ventures and kind of the acquisition side fairly separate. So I think our ventures piece is solely focused on the partnership side. It's really about kind of what I was doing in my previous role. This is why it made sense for me to take on this role is, we really want to accelerate the ecosystem. We want to have a rich set of partners, and love high touch and but we're not kingmakers, right? So you might see other investments in the space where we would look for something in terms of a different differentiating story with anybody else that we invest in. But at the end of the day, we want to provide choice to customers, right? We want to fit into a customer's ecosystem, and every customer is different. They might say, I already have decided these are the tools I work with. And if we come in and say, no, you have to work, that's not what we want to do, right? We want to be able to kind of say, hey, Snowflake works with everybody, but here's the ones that we work really well with, right? This goes a little bit above and beyond when we talk about like the high touch and the ones that we invest in. It means something different in terms of partnership.
Right. Great. Well, look, thank you to the both of you for coming on the show. It is, it's a fascinating company, High Touch. I never thought about all the AI agents that could be sending me push notifications, but I certainly will think about that now. Thank you, Kashish, for coming on the show. Thank you, Harsha, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Okay, on to our final guest. For a long time, it has been very difficult for established companies to switch software providers. I mean, the thing is, you get hooked on a vendor, there's a lot of money and time needed to move to a different vendor. I want to bring on our Microsoft reporter, Aaron Holmes, though, who wrote a story this week about how AI is lowering that barrier to switching software providers. It's making it cheaper. It's making it easier. It was something that really surprised me. Aaron joins us from right here, our newsroom in New York City. Aaron, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about what you found here as it relates to switching costs and software providers.
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, for years, something that IT executives have complained about is that it's extremely labor intensive to move from one type of software to another. And typically in the past, that's included a lot of just like repetitive rote tasks. That can mean, porting data from one application to another, or in some cases, rewriting applications to be in a different software language. But as anyone who has used AI coding tools will tell you, AI is really good at that type of boring, repetitive work. And as a result, what we're starting to see is some companies are finding that they can basically automate the work of moving from one software provider to another. So it's kind of creating this free-for-all where software providers see a big opportunity to convince customers to switch over to their applications, in some cases by actually giving AI tools to those customers that they say will automate the process of moving from one provider to another. And it's creating some interesting downstream effects in software.
And we should say, you say software provider. We're both saying that. I mean, let's just be clear on what kinds of companies are we talking about here that you focused on?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the companies that are being targeted the most by this are the ones that have their hooks really deep into a lot of large enterprises. So Microsoft is one big target just because pretty much, every organization in the world has used Windows to some degree. And that's a target that now we're seeing companies like Amazon try to, convince customers to rewrite their Windows environments into Linux. At the same time, Microsoft is actually saying that they think this trend is good news for them because they can convince other companies to move on to their products. For example, they're going after companies that are using Salesforce CRM software and trying to convince them to move data into Microsoft Dynamics. And I've also heard that some Microsoft salespeople are trying to pitch the Department of Defense on moving data out of applications from providers like Palantir and Lockheed Martin, using tools that Microsoft sells through its AI suite.
So, I mean, you focused on a number of the companies, as one customer switches to the next company and another customer switches to the other company. I mean, did you find, is there a clear winner here so far in this sort of shift that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, so far it's kind of the Wild West, and we're seeing basically every type of software company make this pitch to customers in some form right now. I think the winners are going to be these large enterprises that previously might have felt like they're kind of locked into a specific type of software or
The
specific
customers.
environment, and suddenly they have a lot more flexibility to change that. And also, I'm hearing they're having more leverage to negotiate better licensing with their existing providers because they can now say, look, it's way easier for us to move somewhere else.
And this is great because then the cost of software goes down dramatically because you can finally negotiate.
Right, exactly. And I've heard that those types of conversations are already kind of happening among CIOs across both the government and also large private companies.
Right. I mean, it strikes me as we talk about the way that AI is eating enterprise software, shifting enterprise software, transforming it. I mean, again, it's not necessarily just you being able to recreate the software. It's it being easier to shift to the other software providers. It's kind of a nuanced way that AI is really shifting the landscape of software. That's not actually just replacing it altogether.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that the ways that companies respond to this are kind of unpredictable. I actually heard of one company that was originally, looking to build their own in-house version of Salesforce using vibe coding, and then by the time that they were getting around to doing that, Salesforce had already debuted AI agent features of their own, and the company decided to just stick with Salesforce. So that the landscape is changing rapidly, and the narratives around who is going to win from this also are changing with the wins, but it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out.
You mentioned Windows, and so before you go, you do cover Microsoft, and so let's double click on Microsoft specifically. How is Microsoft grappling with this, and how does it impact them?
Microsoft is seen as a big target because they have such a huge number of large enterprise customers. And, I think it's reasonable to believe that some number of those are going to feel flexible and maybe move to other vendors. But Microsoft at the same time thinks it has a compelling pitch in that, by having Office, by having Dynamics, Windows, Teams, it can actually build AI tools that speak to all of those pieces of software. And Microsoft's pitch is that that will make things cheaper and more simple for customers who want to run AI that interacts with all of those tools. So, Microsoft earnings is tomorrow, and it's going to be really interesting to see exactly how much traction their AI tools are getting. And I would say it's still a very open question.
Last question before you go. You mentioned Microsoft earnings tomorrow. What are you watching for?
I mean, the biggest question, as always, is how much Azure is growing. They have hinted that Azure growth is going to stay roughly flat or maybe slightly speed up. And I think shareholders are going to be looking really closely at whether that's the case. And then, as always, we're also looking for any evidence of how many people are paying for Microsoft's AI software, such as Office 365 Copilot, just because the company has been pretty tight-lipped about actually disclosing revenue for those products. And most shareholders feel that pretty soon they need to start showing evidence that those are actually raising their bottom line.
Great. Well, Aaron, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming. And you can expect a Slack from me tomorrow after Microsoft earnings because Actually, he sits two desks over from me, so sometimes I just yell at him. But I will be sure to send you a note after earnings tomorrow. Thank you, Aaron, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. That is Aaron Holmes, our Microsoft reporter. And that does it for today's show, folks. A reminder that we are live on this stream Monday through Friday, every day, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I am already excited for tomorrow's show. Reminder, we have got 4 of the magnificent 7 that are reporting earnings Wednesday and Thursday. So we've got a jam-packed show for you the rest of the week. My name is Akash Pasricha. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.